Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We start the second video on June 2020, paper 1-1, and you all know this is a 1 hour paper. So in the first video, I discussed question 1 to 20. Now I'm going to discuss question 21 to 40. And let's start with question number 21 first. Now, which statements describe the pupil reflex in pupil reflex? You see, you have to realize what are we talking about the pupil. The pupil is that part of the eye which contains the colored part of the eye. In the center, you have the pupil. Now, what do we have here? You have circular muscles of the iris, right? And you have radial muscles of the iris, which are radiating out like the wheel spokes of a wheel, radial tires. Now, there are two types of muscles, and the pupil can either become, the pupil is this dark aperture in the center of the eye. If you look at somebody's eye, you can see this. And this aperture can either become smaller or it can become wider. So this aperture can become, so how is it going to change size? How is it going to change size is by the muscles of the iris. So these are the muscles of the iris. And they are circular muscles of the iris and they are radial muscles of the iris. So if it becomes smaller, just like a rubber band has to become smaller, the rubber band must become smaller. So the circular muscles become smaller. So circular muscles become smaller. Here the circular muscles become wide, relax. So here circular muscles contract, here circular muscles relax. Circular muscles relax here when the pupil becomes larger. Here the circular muscles contract. So when one contracts, the other has to relax. So this is what we had to understand is that what we were talking about the pupil reflex. We weren't talking about the lens. We were talking about the iris. So then you have to just underline iris everywhere. So now what you have to understand is where was the iris. So iris we were going to talk about, ciliary muscle was wrong. So we didn't want to talk about this. Lens we were not going to talk about. So just cancel all those out. And we have to talk about bright light. When somebody shines a torch in your eye with this bright light, the pupil becomes smaller. Why? Why do we want the pupil to become smaller or the pupil to constrict? Why? Because we want less light entering the eye. Why? Because too much light can damage the retina, not the eye. So too much light can damage the retina. So in bright light, the pupil will constrict. So this is why we had first three. Circular muscles contract, then pupil constricts, and then 10 radial iris muscles relax. Now, if we said the other way around in dark, then you would have been the other way around. You could have then said what? Instead of 3, what would you have said? Circular muscle, you would have said then 4. Circular muscles relax. Instead of 7, you would have said 8. And instead of 10, you would have said 9. So if I change this MCQ to not bright light and I said dark, so it would be 4, 8, and 9. So it would be 4, 8, and 9. Yes. So I mean, I've changed the same question. I've pointed out to you two possible answers which could have come in this. Now coming on to question number 22. Which chemical produced by the body alters the activity of a target organ? I mean, target organ, you have to understand a target organ is what? Target organ is always that of a hormone. So hormone target organ. This is what is the hormones? Hormones are chemical substance produced in a gland which work at a distant target organ. Like in the pancreas, insulin produced will work will work on the liver. So the pancreas produces insulin while it goes through the blood supply. So this is the pancreas, and then it will enter the bloodstream. So there's a pancreatic artery, there's a pancreatic vein, and when it produces certain hormones, the hormone produced like insulin and glucagon will enter the blood, and then it will enter the blood, and then it will reach the liver. And the liver, there'll be receptors for it. On the cells of the liver, there'll be receptors for it. So there'll be receptors here which will be present on the cells, and there it will fit and it will convert the glucose to glycogen. So please understand this target organ. Target organ has to be a hormone, can't be anything else. So C was the answer. Question 23. Now you see 23, it says the diagram shows a section through the human brain. Which label part contains the temperature regulation? Now you know temperature regulation is that area which is just above this is the pituitary gland, this is the brain, And the area just above this is called the hypothalamus. So that area just above the hypothalamus is the area which results in temperature regulation control. Pituitary gland is of course this one which you can see here. And this is the pituitary gland. So you need to see more diagrams of the brain. Now this of course would be the cerebellum. C would be the cerebellum and D would be the medulla. And B is some internal part of this, of course, is the ventricle part, is the fluid part in the brain, which of course we don't study. Coming to question number 24, which statements about the elbow joint are correct? When the biceps muscle contracts, the elbow is bent. When the biceps muscle contracts, the elbow is bent. Yes, that's correct. When the triceps muscle relax, the elbow is straightened. When the triceps muscle relax, no, when the triceps muscle contracts, then the elbow is straightened. Skeletal muscles work in antagonistic pairs. Yes. So 1 and 3. Why they work in antagonistic pairs? Because you see, when one contracts, the other relaxes. So you need to sometimes straighten your arm, sometimes you bend your leg. So all skeletal muscles are attached to bones and they bring about movement of the bones. Otherwise, you won't be able to walk or move your arms or bend your arm or eat your food because you will take the morsel to your mouth. So you bend your arm and then you straighten the arm and then you take another piece of food. Question 25, next question. What are the effects of heroin? Can cause addiction. Definitely yes. Delays sleep and increases alertness. No, that's wrong. Withdrawal symptoms are severe. Yes, that's correct. So that is why the answer was C. Question number 26. Which process brought about by microorganisms does not depend on anaerobic respiration? Not. Read this carefully, not dependent. That means the three of these were depending on it. The conversion of milk and yogurt by bacteria, milk into yogurt by bacteria. Yes, anaerobically acid is produced and all that, and then the protein casein is converted to caseinogen. The formation of lactic acid in cheese, then the release of alcohol by the action of yeast. Now, this is all, you could have guessed all of this is by the fact that we talked of lactic acid and we talked of alcohol. This is all anaerobic respiration. Conversion of milk into yogurt, yes, anaerobic respiration by bacteria. So the answer to this was D, because the synthesis of single cell protein in fermenters is nothing to do with anaerobic respiration. It's just a process of how we can grow single cell proteins, culturing single cell proteins, nothing to do with anaerobic respiration. So if you knew that, only then you could do this question. Then question 27. The diagram shows the equipment used in the industrial production of penicillin. You know, penicillin is an antibiotic and we use the fungus penicillium to produce the antibiotic penicillin. So you've got nutrients and microorganisms in, you have a vent which allows carbon dioxide out, you have water out, water in, and then there's a stirrer, and then there's sensors for temperature and pH, and then these are the products which are harvested whenever we get when we are taking out the penicillin. What is the purpose of the structure labeled X? Now X is a cooling jacket. So basically when you've added so much of the microorganisms to it, it's just like too many people into the room becomes stuffy and hot because everybody's at 37 degrees Celsius. So similarly, so many microorganisms is going to generate a lot of heat because they're respiring and they are releasing energy, and that of course results in heat. So why have we got this X? X is a cooling jacket and it says water in and then water out. So basically the water is coming in into this cooling jacket, and then of course it's in here and the water is coming out here. So the water is coming in here and then out here. So why are you using it? To remove the heat produced by the fermentation process. Fermentation is anaerobic respiration but releases energy. So you have to understand this is the release of energy is going to generate heat as well, right? Now coming to question number 28. Question number 28 says the flow of energy in ecosystems is non-cyclical. Yes, because when you energy from the sun, it does not go back to the sun. Energy from the sun, photosynthesis, then you eat those plants and the energy is used by you. And then you run about it. That energy does not go back to the sun ever. What is the main reason of this? Is energy is transferred from living organisms as heat. So that heat energy can not go back to the sun. So that is why It cannot never, so energy is not a cyclical nature, like we say carbon cycle and nitrogen cycle and water cycle. But we cannot never say an energy cycle, because basically the energy which we receive on the earth is from the sun, and that energy can never go back to the sun. So please understand why it is transferred from living organisms as heat was the correct answer, and all these other answers were wrong. Why? Energy can be transferred back to its original source. No, it cannot be transferred back to the sunlight, to the sun. Energy is not transferred from living things to their environment. Wrong. Energy is only transferred from smaller to larger organisms. No, that's incorrect. Smaller to larger, what does it mean? Sometimes, a lion eats a deer. This is larger to smaller, and eating the deer is going to get its energy. So that was all incorrect. So you had to be really good in English to be really understanding this question. Otherwise, it wasn't require much of biology. Now, this is a very good question, 29. The diagram shows a food chain: grasses, zebras, lions, and fleas. Now, you have to remember is these two are wrong. Why? Because the fleas have to be in great numbers. So the last one has to be a lot. Now, in this there were smaller ones. These were smaller. So this was wrong. These two are wrong because this is a pyramid of numbers. Say you had, say, 1,000 grass plants. Now, how many zebras do you have on that? Maybe 50. And then how many lions do you have? 10. And then you have 100,000 fleas living on those lions. So this is why this was wrong here. Because you see, it's a pyramid of numbers. So that means you had 1,000 grasses, and now you had 10 zebras, and then you have 50 lions. Now that's not possible. So this is how you had to figure this out, which one was right and which one was wrong. So you always put some numbers on it, write some numbers on it, pyramid of numbers. So if I say this is 1,000, this is 50, this is 10, and then 100,000 fleas on it, or 10,000 fleas on it, or 100,000 fleas on it. Now, how could this be the opposite way? It's if you say 1,000 grass plants, and then you have 10 zebras on it, and then you have 50 lions feeding on those zebras. That's not possible because the number has to decrease. As you go along the food chain, the numbers has to decrease because they are eating those animals and they don't eat the whole animal. So a lion is going to eat a zebra. So zebra, the energy from the zebra goes to the lion. So if there are 10 zebras, there may be 2 lions because all the zebras will not be eaten. So this is what you have to figure out in this question, which is on the food chain, and it's a pyramid of numbers. Now question number 30. Now this was the diagram shows parts of the nitrogen cycle. The nitrogen cycle questions are usually very challenging. Which arrow represents the action of the root nodule bacteria of leguminous plants? Now if you remember this, it is the nitrogen in the air which is used by the bacteria to convert it into ammonia. And these are, of course, if you look at my video on ecology, you need to revise nitrogen cycle because that will help you to understand how we have studied the nitrogen cycle. So A was the answer. Why? Because it is going out from nitrogen, because the root nodule bacteria use the atmospheric nitrogen and convert it into ammonia and then for amino acids for the plants. So this was, of course, what you had to understand is which parts of the nitrogen cycle were they really examining you. So this is putrefying bacteria, and then nitrites to nitrates is nitrification or nitrifying, and this is uptake by roots, D, because the nitrates are taken up and they convert into nitrogen containing green plants. So this is how you need to be understanding. You need to be very clear on the nitrogen cycle in order to do these questions. Now another very good question. 31. Which row matches a method of controlling malaria with the explanation of how this method works? Covering windows with nettings. If you have windows with nettings, well, what will it do? It will prevent the mosquitoes entering your homes. So then they won't be sucking your blood and they won't be disturbing your sleep. Then, so it doesn't kill mosquitoes. You just prevent them from entering the house if you have netting or jali on your windows in the house. Then I'm just going to talk about the ones which were wrong. Taking anti-malarial tablets. You take anti-malarial tablets so that if God forbid the plasmodium enters when a mosquito sucks your blood, then if the plasmodium enters, then already if you have the tablet, it will kill the plasmodium. So this was wrong. Then using insecticides. If you spray Morton spray in your room before you go to bed, Well, you're killing the mosquitoes. You're not killing the malarial parasite. The malarial parasite is Plasmodium, which is not even a bacteria, not a virus. It is a protozoa, and this is inside your blood. And that is why you have malaria, because you have these Plasmodium which live inside your red blood cells or they live inside your liver cells. So insecticide is not going to kill them. Insecticide is not even going to harm you. It's going to kill any mosquitoes which might be present, whether they are male or female. Basically, it's the female which transfers malaria. But even if they are male mosquitoes, they'll be killed if they are in the room. But the male ones don't do us any harm. It's the female ones which are the ones which are bad and they suck blood of humans. Question 32. Areas of tropical rainforests are often cut down and cleared. After cutting down the trees, the areas are normally burnt. Areas means whatever little plants might be present. You've cut down the trees and now you are burning that area. So there might be shrubs or there might be herbs there or there might be other plants there which are there, some grass plants, some other smaller shrubs. So what have you done when you have burnt it? You're decreasing the carbon dioxide and you're decreasing the variety of species and you're decreasing the soil stability, because with the fire, you're also killing the microorganisms in the soil. So you're not doing a very good job. You're in fact biologically doing something very incorrect. So this was the answer to the reason is that yes, increases carbon dioxide. Why? Because burning them is going to release carbon dioxide, and you're going to kill all the different plants which were growing there, and even microorganisms living in the soil, you're going to kill those as well. Question 33. Now it's very simple. If you look at a few, just in the search, Google search, put seed structure, and you look at a number of seeds. So basically this outer covering is called the testa. Then one, you can see this, I always say it looks like a little leafy thingy. And this is the plumule, which is going to become the leaves of the shoot. The plumule is going to ultimately become the shoot. And this part, which I'm going to shade in another color, which is labeled 2, this is going to grow down and develop into the root. So this is the radicle. And this is going to grow and develop into the root. So it was simple. You had to say 1 was plumule, 2 was the radicle, and 3 was the cotyledons. Cotyledons are the food store. So all this was the cotyledons, which is the food store, or I say the lunchbox of the little baby plant, because till it sort of grows and develops leaves, it cannot photosynthesize. So it has to have its own food, and that food is stored in the cotyledons. And there's 1 monocot. If it's 2, then dicot. So you need to revise this. If you are not clear on this, you need to be able to figure this out in any diagram which you can find. Coming to question number 34. Which processes involve parts of the carpel of a flower? Now you remember carpel is the stigma, the style, and the ovary which contains the ovules. Now anything to do with pollen or pollination, you know, is the anthers. And the anthers and the filament. So anther and the filament is called the stamen. And this is, I always say, it's very easy to remember this. This is called stamen, S-T-A-M-E-N, male part of the flower. So anther and filament is the stamen. So anything to do with pollination, pollen was all wrong. That is the male part. And there's nothing to do with the carpel. So only our choice C was left. So you had to know that it was C, forming fruit and pollination. Yes, I mean, sorry, I think I sort of misled you a little bit. But basically, why is pollination allowed here is because it receives the pollen. It receives the pollen. So it is because what is pollination? Transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma. So basically, that is what was the point is receiving the pollen was pollination and forming the fruit. But why were these wrong? Attracting insects and pollination, that's not part of the carpel. That is because of the petals. Then fertilization and producing pollen. Yes, anthers produce pollen. Fertilization occurs in the ovules. So that was wrong. But forming fruit and pollination. Forming fruit means, of course, when the pollen lands on it, it receives the pollen. Releasing pollen was again wrong because the anthers release the pollen. Then coming on to question number 35, what identifies a cause, a symptom, and treatment for syphilis? So cause is syphilis is a bacterial disease. Symptoms, joints become painful. You know what are signs and symptoms? Signs means something which you can see and check. Symptom is what the patient feels and you cannot check. So joints become painful. If somebody says my joints are painful, you have no way to check it whether he's telling you the truth or anything. And treatment is using antibiotics. So the disease was syphilis, which is a bacterial disease. So virus was wrong. Virus was wrong. It is a bacterial disease. And treatment is not vaccination. Vaccination is not a treatment anywhere. It's not a treatment even in the present day corona pandemic. Then coming to question number 36. In which parts the diagram shows the female reproductive system? You know, 2 is the ovary, and 1 is the oviduct or the fallopian tubes, and 3 is the cavity in the uterus. This is the uterus. Now it says what? It says in which parts are the eggs and zygote formed? Everybody knew the eggs are formed in the ovary. So the eggs are formed in the ovary, and that is when ovulation takes place, and this ovum is released. Now when this ovum is released and it enters the oviduct, now what happens? The sperms are deposited here and they are traveling all this way, and they come here and they fertilize it here. And this is the point where a zygote is formed. So the zygote will be formed in 1, and the eggs are produced in 2, which is the ovaries. So you have to understand is that ovulation takes place. I'm going to just repeat myself. Ovulation results in the release of the ovum into the oviduct, right? So an ovum is released into the oviduct, right? Now, the sperms deposited in the vagina during sexual intercourse have to travel all this way, and they come here and they fertilize this. And fertilization takes place in the outer 1/3 of the oviduct. And when that happens, a zygote is formed. So this is the ovum, this is the sperm, and when they fuse, what is formed? A zygote is formed. And the zygote is formed in the oviduct. So that's why it was 2 and 1. The answer was C. Question 37. Natural selection plays a role in evolution. What describes features of natural selection that can affect ovulation? Evolution, sorry, not ovulation, evolution. Better adapted individuals have a greater chance of surviving and breeding. Yes. So these two were correct. Survivors may transfer an advantageous features to their offspring. That is what is the whole story of natural selection and evolution. That those that are better adapted will survive and pass on the better alleles or pass on the desirable alleles to their offsprings. So the whole generations will improve. So yes and yes. So the answer was D. Why? Because they do pass on the advantageous features to their offsprings. So that was question 37. Now coming on to question number 38. In guinea pigs, the allele for black fur is dominant. So black ones will be what? Black ones will be either this or they will be this. I always tell you to write this down. To the allele for brown fur. Now the brown fur would always be this. There can't be anything else. So all the brown guinea pigs will be small b, or they will be homozygous recessive. So reading question 38, in guinea pigs, I said the allele for black fur is dominant. Big B is dominant, so I said only black Bs are this and this. Then I said the brown ones are going to be this ones. Now a breeder can sell a brown guinea pig. So we want all browns. We don't want any blacks. We want all browns. Browns for more money than a black guinea pig. So we don't want the blacks, we want the brown ones. Which cross will produce the most money? So which cross will produce more browns? So basically here what do we have? Here all are going to be this. Now all are going to be this means what? All are going to be black. All are going to be black. We don't want the black ones. Here all are going to be black again. Either they will be this or they will be this. So they will also be black. So we don't want that either. Then in this also, what do we have? We have big B, and then we have big B, and we have big B, and then we have small b. So three blacks and one brown, right? But in this, what do we have? Let's look at this now. In this, what do we have? We have big B, and we have big B, and then we have small b, and small b. So we have 2 out of 4 in this. Here we have 1 out of 4 in this. So more money would be in D because we have more money will be in D. Why? Because we have more of the browns here. We want only these browns. We only want the small b ones. So in this we have more of the small b's. So that is why we will be, of course, richer. Here we have 1 out of 4. There we have 2 out of 4 possibilities. So this is how we have to figure this out. Question 39. The inheritance of ABO blood groups in humans is controlled by 3 alleles, IA, IB, IO, only 2 which can be present in one individual. What are the possible blood groups of children born to a homozygous group A? Homozygous group A means she has to be this. And a heterozygous group B. So heterozygous group B means he has to be IBIO. Now what are the possible children? It can be either AB or AO. That's it. Can't be anything else. So the answer was, so this couple can only have an IAIB child, which is this one and this one, and IAIO. And IAIO means it's A group, and this means it's AB group, phenotype. This is the genotype, that's the phenotype. Then coming to the last question, question 40. Which statement is always true for dominant alleles? Now, dominant are that which shows its effect. Dominant allele means it shows its effect either in the homozygous state and even in the heterozygous state. That is a dominant allele. So this is the recessive allele. Now this does not show its effect in the heterozygous state. So they give the same phenotypes in heterozygous and homozygous states. The rest of it was all rubbish. There was nothing, they cannot undergo mutation. No, that's wrong. Dominant is just means that it is present in the heterozygous and it shows its effect. They occur less frequently. No, there is no such situation. We do not have any such research in which we show that something is less frequent or something is more frequent. Either the dominant is less frequent or the recessive is more frequent. So that finishes your this paper, and I hope this has now been helpful. Please do let me know if there is any questions which you would like to do. Just write down in the comments, and I'll try to do it as much as I can and help you out. Thank you very much. This completes question 21 to 40, and thank you.